One Piece film Strong World was the first One Piece movie to directly involve series creator Eiichiro Oda in the writing process, a trend that would continue for the next several movies all the way to the most recent, Film Red. Strong World was the 10th overall One Piece movie to be produced, as well as the movie that marked the 10th anniversary of the One Piece anime. And with follow-up movies like Film Z and Film Gold being of equal if not better quality, it cemented a new era for One Piece movies that's going on to this day. But what about the 9 movies that came before this era? Well, the first official movie was One Piece the Movie in 2000, but if you go by theatrical releases, the first movie is actually the 1998 One Piece OVA that predates Toei's involvement with the series. And fun fact, this is actually directed by the same guy who directed Film Red. Said OVA and the first 3 movies were all released as part of special events, with the movies being part of Toei's Anime Fair events that showcase their properties, which means all 3 of them were released as double features with Digimon. Toei's Anime Fair ended in 2002, which means in 2003 we got the first One Piece movie to be released on its own, and the first one longer than 60 minutes. One of my personal favorites, Dead End Adventure, was the mark of a new generation of One Piece movies. Some could even say it was the worst generation. Okay, being honest, only 3 of the 6 movies in this era are really bad, but that's still only a 50% hit rate. 2004's One Piece: The Cursed Holy Sword was arguably the worst of them, but also still standard affair when compared to previous One Piece movies. On the other hand, its follow-up the next year, Baron no Matsuri and the Secret Island, was a complete departure from what One Piece normally is, essentially just being a horror movie that happened to star One Piece characters, becoming an equally loved and hated cult classic. Ending this era of movies was The Giant Mechanical Soldier of Karakuri Castle, the final mark in a slow decline in box office revenue since Dead End Adventure. Grossing just over $7 million, Karakuri Castle made less than half of what Dead End Adventure did, on top of just being a less enjoyable watch. Which brings us to the shortest era of One Piece movies, lasting just 2 years, the recap movies. Episode of Alabasta was a completely reanimated retelling of, you'll never guess, the Alabasta arc, picking up with Picking Up Bon Clay, and ending with the Straw Hats' powerful goodbye. The entire arc is crammed into just 90 minutes, and Jiminy Christmas, you can feel the rush. The next annual release was Episode of Chopper Plus, which took the stance of reimagining the Drum Island arc to take place later in the series rather than just a straightforward retelling. Whether that what-if format was the right call or not is up for you to decide yourself, but it was different enough that it actually managed to claw a larger box office share back, the first increase year over year that any of these movies had since the double feature era. And while it was a brief trend, things were about to shift once more in 2009. Being a big anniversary year for the anime, the retelling format was once again swapped out, taking us back around to